for our next session, where you can see we're going to be talking about the project, the Italians of Montclair, an oral history project. Our next presenter is Dr. Marisa Trubiano. She's an associate professor of Italian in the Modern Languages and Literatures Department here at Montclair, and has been teaching Italian language, literature, cinema, cultural studies, translation, and Italian-American cultural studies courses at Montclair since the year 2000. Dr. Trubiano has worked with her students and community members on an oral history project of the Italians of Montclair, and has served on the board of Italian-American Discussion Group of the Modern Language Association, on the Italian SAT 2 Test Committee as an Italian AP consultant, and as commissioner of the New Jersey Italian and Italian Heritage Commission. It is my privilege and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Trubiano.
Thank you, AJ. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. Before I start, I just want to recognize the people here who have made the Oral History Project possible, and especially this second phase of the Oral History Project possible. I'd like to recognize AJ, Kylie Izquierdo, your staff here, Sergio, Justin, Jenny, Melissa, and Jenny. I want to thank Dean Friedman and the board of the Digital Humanities Center for really assisting us in recognizing new paths that we can take with our humanistic inquiry. It's been an eye-opener and it's been very exhilarating. I also want to thank Chris, who came in, Chris Matthews from Anthropology, as an inspiring force too, because of the work he's doing in storytelling, mapping, and so on. So this experience has opened up a new world to me, I have to say, and it's been exhilarating. This would not have happened without the support of the community. You'll see that this is a long project that began way back in 2002. It would not have happened without Donato Di Geronimo, who will be presenting today, who is one of the most progressive and consensus-building members of the Italian-American community that it's been my honor to work with. And Donato will tell us a little bit about his experience, and certainly our new partner, represented by Jane Eliasof of the Montclair History Center, and a new partner really in this enterprise. Why did we resuscitate to a certain extent the Italians of Montclair Oral History Project right now? It's always been in our minds because there have been new possibilities now created for us. Inspired by Montclair's 150th anniversary, the Many Voices Project, and again, the two key people here for us are certainly Donato and Jane. But last but not least, one of our student interns here, Rosanna Coviello, double major in Italian and jurisprudence, who's been working with me in using the software that I am still learning. If you came to this presentation expecting conclusions, you won't find any yet, but you will find the path that we're taking, the questions that are emerging, and how we're trying to answer them. We are talking about collective memory and memory sites that take the forms that you see here. Language, monuments, memorials, rural landscapes, urban environs, testimonies, and embodied performances. And we recognize that collective memories are semiotic sites that are both discursive and spatial, and these are sites of ongoing debate and contestation. And we know that not all participants enter into this contest over memory as equals, and some have lost more than others. And we are looking at underrepresented populations, and we hope to continue to embrace that focus. If I had to ask you, who are the best storytellers in your family or your circle of friends, what would you say? Who are the storytellers that you look to for a sense of your own history? Think of those people. Who are they? Who do you go to say, oh, you know what, grandpa used to live on, X street, and then he moved to where, or great grandpa, where the heck do we come from? I mean, I know it's, Ukraine, I know it's Italy, but I don't exactly remember, it's amazing. It's amazing, I guess, because I'm so interested in this kind of project, how much we're always trying to investigate who we are, where we came from. For me, the best storyteller is my zia Solina, who reminds me, for example, who grew up in Castiglione Casauria in Abruzzo, and painted pictures for me, of what my grandmother's situation was like. A single mother during World War II, working in the fields with the Allied bombs above her, oblivious to her own physical safety, and aware that her priority was feeding her children. And I always go back to Zia Solina and ask her and write down what it is that she says, because it reminds me of the complex stories with a lowercase, what is that, lowercase s, as opposed to, the story that we're told with capital S. I'll walk you through a little bit of the oral history project. Started a long time ago in 2002 with the community Participation Center in 2002 and the Institute for Community Studies. Thanks to Donato, we were able to meet with members of the Italian American community. Thanks to Donato, Ruth Constatter, and Frank Gerard Godlewski, that you'll meet via photo shortly. We had scanning parties at the library, I believe, on the Montclair State campus. People from the community came, told us their stories, we scanned their photos, and this new iteration of the project is allowing us to go beyond just collecting and to the dissemination, to the accessible part of the project. We've received grants from the Italian government, a Cali faculty grant, the Kocha Institute, and we curated two exhibits, the trio I mentioned, with Laura Caparotti of Kairos, Rome, Italy, at the Crane House. It was the Crane House then, and the Montclair Public Library. So we've amassed about 80 interviews across generations, and I'm most proud that we've involved 30 students, but maybe over 30 at this point, in various courses that we offered. And again, my gratefulness to the Digital Humanities Center for allowing us now to answer, like I said, this opened a world for me. What's the most useful form in which to give back this history to its actors, and what's the most direct and participatory form to offer the information to the public? I feel like the trajectory of this project kind of mirrors how oral history is itself developing, from the collecting phase to the content management issues, and digitalizing archives to make them open and accessible, and recognizing that oral history is an auditory experience and not just a visual one, so that we can offer at the clip and segment level searchable and analyzable files, and that makes it potentially more participatory. The dream would be that I know you've already collected more interviews. The dream would be to interact so that people can leave their stories at the site. So these documents alone tell us a little bit about the movement from identifying, and the question of identity, right, so fluid, can't be fixed, from being describing oneself as Italian and then becoming American, whatever those two terms may mean, right? Fluid as they are. And I thought, Donato, maybe you'd like to say a few words, not necessarily about these documents. I thought the linguistic aspect was interesting, but maybe you can speak a little bit about, your family, what this project has meant for you so far. You've been a key collaborator.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Do you have the ride video in any of this?
I don't, but we can share it with.
Share with them later.
Yes, absolutely.
No,
So tell them what we're talking about.
Okay, this originally, COPSI, you'll see up on the top, was money coming through a program that was actually affiliated with Montclair State to, it was like almost $400,000 they were giving to the Montclair, where the train connection project was, which happened to be heavily Italian and African American. And that district, through all this process, became a historic district, the Pine Street Historic District. And I guess, Chris, you're going to be delving into that a little bit. So they were trying to figure out what to do with this money. So they were doing affordable housing initiatives, trying to help people with mortgages. And then there was a history component too. Also, they wanted to look back and see what did this area, consist of. And going back to probably the 1890s, it was heavily Italian. And if you go through there, you can see the buildings reflect that. My interest in it, I grew up in Montclair. My family was probably one of the largest families in Montclair. Almost 1,000 people from 1902 grew up there. I had, my grandmother is a twin. She had a twin sister. They married two brothers. They had 15 and 13 kids, lived in the same house with everybody for 20 years. Their older brother married first cousin and had 10. Their older sister married another first cousin. So it was 48 kids just from those two men. And they all grew up within like 3 blocks of each other. So we had a love for Montclair. And getting back to what she was saying, I'm very close. My father has only one sister. There's only one person left, and she just turned 100 this year. And she has a great memory. And then his first cousins, there's a couple of them in their 90s, and my uncle was, I was on the fire department in Montclair. He was also on the fire department. He knows everything. I can just sit down, and I'm constantly asking questions. And don't lose that, because once they're gone, you just kind of lose a lot of history. I'm lucky to be able to get this. I was able to drive my grandmother around and have her talk to me. She passed away in 1981. But that's something I think is very important, is to try and capture that. But this project, what we wound up doing, we had everybody in the room just for the history component, and then we decided we're going to do the Italian part and the African American part separate, and that kind of went off on that, that direction, and it was supposed to come back together. And we had our first at the Montclair History Center, which at that time was the Montclair Historical Society, in the Crane House. Now it's the Crane House Historic YWCA, and you have to look into that a little bit. But we had an exhibit there for a month, and it was very well attended. And then the African American part had an exhibit right after that. They never completed. They were going to do 3 parts, and that was also very well attended. So the ethnic history of Montclair, which that Montclair's a very wealthy town, and always was, but always went from very, very poor to very, very wealthy, and it still kind of does, although the very poor are starting to get pushed out a little bit more through gentrification a little bit. But that's my story, that's my interest in it, and I want, that. I'm on the board of the Montclair History Center now. Jane is the executive director, and it's interesting to me now because I tell her all the time, she's spicy to me, that the Montclair Historical Society didn't mean anything to the ethnic groups, the Italians, the Irish, the African Americans. It always just seemed like it was people from the Mayflower, but now that we're doing a lot more. The house has been renamed Historic YWCA because it was the only YWCA in probably the whole United States, I guess.
No, there were, I can get into that when I get up there.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So that's just my story, and my interest is, because I grew up there and I love the town. Thank you very much, but
Yes.
The ride video would explain something too.
Yes.
That's on the website.
Okay, we can make that available to attendees. Thank you, Donato. In a transnational context, cultural identity is more fluid and less grounded in a specific geographical space at the same time. We had the oral history project begin, we had the exhibits, there was a website, the Italian People of Montclair, thanks to Donato. Then there's a Facebook
Excuse me
community.
just for a second.
Go ahead.
I just want to point.
There, yes, I know.
These are those twins in
There they are.
pictures from 1902. They were 8 years old in that picture.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
I love that picture.
Yes, yes, it's fantastic. There has been a twinning between Aquilonia and Montclair. Interestingly, one of the first embodiments of the twinning really was, I think it was the invitation to town officials from Aquilonia to participate in the Columbus Day Parade. That's, from my point of view, somewhat problematic. I would see other moments, let's say, of coming together rather than, the problematic. But in and of itself is an interesting object of inquiry. But anyway, so you have this twinning of the two towns. The future trajectories are now, what we're looking into now, mapping the memories and the stories. I think, Chris, you had mentioned, like a suggestion would be an app of this kind, what was there and history here, something like that, to allow for the community to express itself in this new space. I'd like to invite Jane to say a few words, how these oral history projects are possibly related.
So what I'd like to do is thank you for inviting me, first of all. But what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the Montclair History Center, because we've been sort of running on a parallel track to you guys, and it seems we're in a place where we can kind of come together and begin to sort of merge what we've been doing so far. The Montclair Historical Society was founded in 1965 when this house, all the way on the left, which was the Crane House, built in 1796, was threatened by demolition. It's down where the Geiger YMCA is now, down by Lackawanna Plaza, and in about 6 weeks' time, it was saved and moved up Bloomfield Avenue in an event that anybody who was around in Montclair remembers to this day. Moved up Bloomfield Avenue and settled into its new home, where it told the story of Israel Crane, who would never sign a Declaration of Independence. He was never a governor or any elected official, but he was a pretty big mover and shaker in Montclair. So they interpreted the house during that period as a decorative arts museum that told the story of this founding father of Montclair. The story that they didn't tell, and we started to tell robustly in 2014, is the story of when it was a black YWCA from 1920 to 1965. And to me, that's a really fascinating story. It's a story about women who were persevering, who were achieving, who had an incredible amount of grace and foresight. And so we dedicated 2 of the rooms at present to telling that story. We created a documentary that was based on the oral histories of 9 of the women who were part of it, 2 of whom, unfortunately, have passed away since then. And now do public programming. For example, Sunday I did what we call our Eyewitness to Black History tours, where you go room by room through the different periods of history in the house, talking about what was going on with African American history in New Jersey, which remarkably so many people don't even realize that there was slavery through the mid-1800s here. So there's a lot to learn. Over the years, we acquired 3 other houses. The next one is the Nathaniel Crane House, and my spacing obviously got crazy on that. That was built in 1818. The Clark House, which is our administrative offices, but most relevant today, it's also our archives and library. And the Charles Schultz House on the corner, built in 1896, given to us in 1996, and really contains absolutely everything that that family ever owned including toilet paper and tissue boxes. So it's really quite a remarkable thing. So our archival collection, I'm really proud to say that over the last 6-7 years, we have now gone through everything we have, and it's all on our Past Perfect database. So you can call us and say, do you have anything on such and such, and we can actually look and see. So I'm very excited about that. It includes a lot of this, let me preface it by saying a lot of this just shows up on our doorstep, so sometimes it's not as comprehensive as we'd like it to be. So we've got a variety of tax and county maps, books on Montclair history. Some of them are the kind of classic Montclair history books like Doremus. Some of them are a little more obscure, like Who's Who in Colored History, or Who's Who in Colored America, and it has a lot of Montclair names in it. Vintage photographs, phone directories, school yearbooks. We have the Old New Jersey Archives collection, which is pretty funny because I was trying to do my genealogy, and I was looking all over the place for where I could access these New Jersey Archives collection, and then discovered one day that they were like in the office next to me, and I had no idea. Extensive Crane family genealogy, scrapbooks, and a lot of files on African American life, different ephemera from the Montclair Dramatic Club to the Montclair Social Club, all sorts of different Montclair organizations from the last 100 years or so. And then most relevant today is the oral histories. Now I'm going to stop here for a second and just tell you something that's like hot off the press because we just agreed on it on board last night, is that we have an awful lot of this has been digitized. For example, many of our tax and county maps have been digitized already. Our phone directories have been digitized, and you can get them on the Montclair Public Library website. But the problem with it is that when you want to search somebody's name, you basically download the entire directory. Now, I don't know about you, but I really don't need the entire 1918 directory resident on my computer. So we have not really been publicizing the fact that we've got these phone directories all digitized and ready to go. Some of our files are, and definitely our oral histories are digitized. We also have an amazing collection of quilts that are digitized, that are resident on the New Jersey Digital Highway. So we've been trying to figure out how do we get all this stuff so that it can be our collection on some sort of digital asset management system that would allow people to go on and look for it without having to come into the office to see what we've got. So as of last night, the board approved a test of Luna. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that system. It's far more reasonable for a small organization like ours than some of the bigger ones like Content DM. It's used by some of the heavy hitters. The New York Municipal Archives has got their stuff on there, so I feel like we're not going with some run-of-the-mill thing that's going to go out of business tomorrow. But I think what we're going to try and do is start putting some of our tax maps, some of our postcard collection, and also our phone directories up there. With those phone directories, then, if you type in DiGeronimo, it'll show up all of every single one of the DiGeronimos, which is going to be like a huge search. But it'll show up, not only the phone directories, but if there are any postcards or pictures of them, or if they're listed on the Sanborn map or something, you'll see them all there, which is really kind of cool. So that's really exciting for us. One of the other things we want to get up there are the oral histories. And this is what we have in our system right now. We have 7 nurses who talked about their experience in World War II. I don't know when that was done. I can't find any record of it, but we got them. We've got the African American information that you had talked about prior from 2002, 2005. And then we also have the women we interviewed as part of the documentary in 2012 and 13. And then last year, with the help of Chris Matthews and his anthropology class, we did what we called our Many Voices Oral History Project that was for the 150th anniversary. It was funded by the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, and what we hoped would be 20 or 25 interviews, enough so that each one of Chris's students had at least one interview to do. Instead of the 20 to 25, we wound up with over 62 interviews and 70 people. Some of them were group. The sisters came together, the cousins came together. And we did it in 3 locations where we had storytelling events, as we called them. And then we also scanned any documents they might have. And we had TV34 there, and so they actually did little sound bites. They would ask, we would say, the best story you told was Peter Jufra, how you decided to become Elvis Presley in the 4th of July parade. So you get up there and you tell that story on camera as well. So we have a small collection of actual video as well as audio on it. We also did, and as you can see, TV34 is videotaping him and the documents that we scanned, but we're now in the process of trying to figure out, okay, so now what do we do with all these things? And also on the digital asset management system, how do we make it so that those all come up as a file, so you can see it as a related file? Okay, so if you hear Peter Jufra's story, what other pictures does he have? So that's kind of what we're trying to figure out how to deal with. But as I say, this is brand new, hot off the press. And after these 3 storytelling days, we're still getting phone calls from people saying, I want to tell my story, I want to tell my story. So it's wonderful, and that crosses all parts of Montclair life. There are some, we have Molly, who is his 100-year-old grandmother or aunt, who talked, and several of his other relatives, but we also have folks from the African American community. We have folks who grew up on Upper Mountain and were more of the Mayflower crowd. So we've got lots of diversity in what we were able to get, and I'm really excited about seeing what we're going to do. We did get another grant from the New Jersey Council for Humanity, another incubation grant. And we're going to be sitting down with a group of advisors and say, okay, what can we do with this? How can we get it out to the public? To answer your question, how do we get it out to the public in the most interesting and accessible way? So we're really excited about the partnership because I think it gives us yet another way to begin to get that material out.
Exactly. Yep.
And thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to the Center for the Digital Humanities, we've converted all the audio files that we had on those Lacey hard drives. Now they are they've been copied and they can be shared more efficiently. We're coding the transcripts of the interviews, and we'll talk about that a little bit with Rosanna, and the audio and video files. We're looking to map the sites of memory of the community, and we're hoping to make the oral history searchable, analyzable by segment and clip. So, and at the same time, with ArcGIS, we're hoping to make the data immediately visible in new ways via layers, and that's where we were speaking that we could, with the town of Montclair, with the help of Graham Petto, the assistant planner of Montclair, clearly there's a collaboration possible here on a number of levels, making geo-participation reality. So I thought I would I'm new to this software myself, but I thank AJ and Kyla for introducing me to MAXQDA and to ArcGIS. So this allows us to, that is MAXQDA, the qualitative data analysis software, allows us to import all our doc files, the transcripts, into a project, and then with the help of Rosanna and Domenica, after reading the interviews and discussing them a little bit, coming up with the codes that we find, that is themes, and subcodes, sub-themes that we find are running through many of the interviews. And so in one window, you can create a code system. Frankly, I'm still figuring that out. It's really, that's why in my description it says a little confounding, but exhilarating always. And we can do this, it's so exciting, I almost jumped out of my seat. We can do the same thing with the audio files. So we can code them as pertains to, like I chose just a couple, like Cherry Street, for example, because now it no longer exists. So in the words of Antoinette McGuinness, Cherry Street exists. In her and her brother's photographs, it exists. In Donato's photographs, 13 Grand Street exists. In his memories, it exists, and we hope to make it relive in this new space. I was playing around with this so then you can get really artistic and do some creative coding, and it's helping me really visualize in a different way, the themes that are running through these interviews. So something that, fascinates me, obviously, is language, right? The loss of language, we were saying, the use of dialect, how Italian becomes, or dialect has become like the language of intimacy, whereas, English was something, the official language and something one had to learn right away, etc. But what's interesting about this, I'm sorry, Jane, is that then, let's say you're in this creative coding mode. I'm sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but I can provide you with the PDF. You can click on this, and everywhere, so what was this? So everywhere this theme appears, you can see where it is in the text files and in the audio files, which is really exciting. And then you can export this so you know exactly where to go to find those themes. So I can visualize, the light at the end of the tunnel, but we really are at the beginning here. Yeah, AJ.
So I just wanted to say something quick about MAXQDA, because I've been working with Marisa on this. One of the things, how this becomes, if we're envisioning something as far as a digital humanities projects and talking about how something is now visible in ways that wasn't possible before. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine having to sit with index cards and highlighters and go through all of these documents individually and then try and find some way to categorize all those index cards, right? That's what MAXQDA is doing on the background, and it's allowing the researchers to pull together all these hashtags, codes, whatever you want to call them, to be able to pull them together quickly where it would have taken hours of research in the library. And I don't want to encourage people not to go to the library, that's not the point, right? But the point is to say that this is a real time reduction, and this is where it becomes a digital humanities focus, in that we are able to see connections that we could potentially some that we could not have seen without the use of the technology.
Right. Thank you, AJ. So you can, pull, you can visualize the codes and subcodes or themes in a easier, more efficient way. You can pull occurrences of those themes as they come up, and you can do that with audio files as well. So one of the I mentioned the inspiration that's coming from work that colleagues are doing, and also a site like this, the City of Memory. We're envisioning clicking on an address, and then the clips and the text segments and the photos will be available, at a click. So much of this material is thanks to Donato's Italians of Montclair Facebook page. Some of the sample codes that we've been looking at are these. And maybe, Rosanna, you can speak to how we were trying to come up with codes and some of the difficulties or what you see as you're part of that project. So here's some of the codes we were looking at, for example. Okay. But it's not, I think we've got thousands at this moment in time.
Good morning. Yeah, like Professor Trubiano said, it was really difficult coming up with these codes because you're taking so many interviews and you want to accurately and successfully represent what these individuals were saying. So even like one of the codes was feelings about either the immigration experience or assimilating into America. That itself was difficult because, again, we want to accurately depict what these people were feeling. But for starters, I'll start off with the first question. What elements of the Italian experience in Montclair most resonated with you? For me, and I believe also Domenica, who couldn't be here today, would agree with me on this, it was amazing to see how much like how many Italians were in the Montclair area, because like Mima, Domenica, we're both Italian, and just seeing, wow, like I had no idea prior to this project that there was such a large Italian community in Montclair. And then even just having the privilege to share their experiences was truly remarkable, even to learning about all the different experiences and what Montclair looked like so many years ago. So coming up with codes, like I said, it was pretty difficult, and Dr. Trubiano helped out a lot with that, because what we started off with first, like I gave an example of how if we had like a code called schools. So then if in one interview they mentioned a college, like either Montclair State College or TCNJ, under that code, we would write that college. And it was incredible after so many times how many occurrences there were for just one college or just for schools in general. Yeah, and also again with emotions or schools or streets. I remember like I think Pine Street and Cherry Street had like the most occurrences throughout all the interviews. So that was amazing to be like, oh wow, didn't know that. Anyways, then in terms of using MAXQDA, at first it was a bit challenging, but AJ helped us out a lot with that. I remember there was one day where we all met and he kind of gave us just the basics of it. And then even the software itself has helpful videos on how to go about using it. So I would say it was pretty user-friendly for what we were doing in terms of like coding. And like AJ said, we got to cover so many interviews in such a small amount of time, if you think about it, because we were able to save so much time in terms of coding and making sure we were able to maximize all the time that we had. So basically it.
Thank you. So we've done
I
up
have a
to,
quick question.
go ahead.
Are you actually doing the coding, or you're just setting the parameters?
So kind of what, do we have a picture of it?
Yep.
Like we did, like the last picture. So kind of what Professor Trubiano said, what we would do is if we saw like language learning, somebody was talking about learning English or learning Italian, we would just highlight that text and then drag it over into that box over there,
Okay.
wherever the
So you
category
were.
was.
So they're creating
Yeah.
and then applying the codes.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's what it was.
I have a question also. Were the tags or codes that you were using, were those all established at the very beginning and you worked off that set list, or were there tags you found that you deleted and added as you went through the process?
Yeah, it was a work in progress. So we started with a
Still is-
good
still is.
amount, but then we just kept adding and adding or deleting, or if we noticed there was duplicates, we would just
You can
combine
merge them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we started, as you had suggested, we started with a list that we put in Canvas and we kept changing, we kept adding to it.
Yeah.
And then as we kept working, it's still a work in progress, we have 30 out of 80. But yeah, it's a constant modification process.
It's a filing cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. But like, Rosanna was saying, I think, and I'll get to it shortly, I think what's really interesting is that, how the past is preserved, because then you find that it's being reconstructed on the basis of the present. So, for example, interviewees were asked, what their relationship with language was. For example, and they immediately say, oh, well, we all learned English right away. We all became citizens right away. And I think that's a narrative that comes from, it's like a rewriting based on situations that are unfolding in the present. And I think this whole project is an interesting way to respond to the social construction of immigration as seen as a problem, and as pertains to urban safety and security issues and things like that. It's an excellent. It's fascinating to see how different generations see. Like the first generation in Pine Street will speak about the poverty and the difficult conditions in which they grew. Subsequent generations, when asked what was that experience like, they said, well, it was better. It was better because they came to America. So there's a different way of encapsulating the past based on what one's stature and position is, or what one would like it to be in the present, which is really fascinating. Now, if you ask me how to map that, that's the question, and that's what we'd like to engage in. So not only like the addresses, but also the feelings about, for example, about Italy, for example, feelings about being Italian, Italian American, American Italian, American, again, whatever those terms mean. We started initial conversations with Graham. One of the obviously possibilities is there's 13 grant on the bottom, right? Reconstructing in this new spaces that no longer exist, the physical spaces that no longer exist. I have to say, Graham really pointed out also new neighborhoods that we didn't necessarily focus on yet. He said Miller Street, Cross Street, and Label Street, for example, that we hadn't, and this dovetails beautifully with, again, the African American experience in Montclair, et cetera, and other immigrant groups as well. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I know that I worked with one of the professors here, I don't want to say her name, but she was writing something on the difference between the interaction of the African Americans and the Italians in Newark versus the interaction of the Italians Americans and African Americans in Montclair. And just the little bit that I was getting from that, there's a big difference because in Newark they stayed in enclaves, and so there was here, and in Montclair they mixed, going back in history to the early 1900s. So it produced a whole different way of looking at life for both groups.
Yes.
So,
You're Frank Nancy, right? Nancy's one.
Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy Cognavala, really an expert in
Yeah.
Italian American history, whose texts we look to for historical data on this experience and also the language issue. So just to give an example, right, how we could recreate Cherry Street based on artifacts that we've been given, and based on here we pulled, right, references to Cherry Street. And you can see we activated all the documents, and we're looking at where Cherry Street is mentioned or has been transcribed. So where on the left in the Sanborn maps of 1907 you see Cherry Street, now through georeferencing we can hopefully recreate it in some way. Excuse my, this is, I'm like scribbling. This is what it looks like when you've got me doing this. This is the thing. That looks really a lot of work. And a really professional job. But I'm trying to figure out where Cherry Street, we position it. So, and you see my just a second if I may, you see my very, very rudimentary map in ArcGIS. You're going to see some really, I think, very advanced work later on today. But just to show you, so we took, I think we'll be working with Graham, but I just wanted to show you, that if I'm working on it, it's very doable. It's a new language for me. I pulled points from the 1898 directory. The walking tour we did in 2005 with Donato and Frank Gerard Godlewski, the Historical Preservation Commission's document on then what we found to be also Italian American points of reference, and I started to plot them so I could see how ArcGIS works. And the idea will be that clicking on that pin, that then the video segment, the audio, the text, the artifacts should pop up. That's the that's the idea, to kind of recreate these sites of memory. And what's really fascinating to me is mapping the unseen. And like Rosanna was saying, how do you map emotions about a place? Because those are what remain. Stanford's literary mapping project that maps readers' feelings about 18th and 19th century texts and how the readers in other artifacts responded to those particular points in London. For example, this is opening up a whole new, possible chapter. Christian Knoll's emotional cartography in San Francisco, where with this kind of contraption, he was able to map I guess the biometrics, right? It was able to map the emotions people felt in certain points of the city, and then they would annotate. So I'm thinking, well, so, you know, thoughts about Italy, thoughts about the loss of language, thoughts about, you know, interactions with neighbors from the Italian American community and other communities. There's really, there are endless possibilities here, and we're hoping to, frankly, learn more how to map a memory, how to map a feeling, because that feeling is what remains. Interestingly, you know, when the places are no longer. There's something interesting also, you know, reading about time geography, how it traces residents' routines and how they were limited in certain spaces. So you can look at their routines of movement and also, you know, map that, and that gives you a sense of the area. So really, we would be investigating the subjective worlds of underrepresented groups. Again, the possibilities are endless, and it's been opened to us through this software. I like those kind of cracks in the narratives. You know, everyone's like, oh, I think this is great, you know, what you're doing with the Italian American community. And one guy just stands and goes, what did anybody ever get out of this? No, but, right, this idea that, well, what does embracing an ethnicity, or, you know, in this case, a lot of people, oh, I'm proud to be Italian, you know, this embracing a national identity, what does it get us? I mean, it gives us a sense of pride initially, but it can block us off from understanding, right, how our stories mesh with others. So I like those difficult moments in which, you know, he's kind of resisting a little bit the project. Why? Why focus on the Italian American community in this way? Right, focusing on it because it meshes with other experiences at the same time, and it's not, you know, ethnocentric. You know, and I thought that was a fascinating read on his part. Elizabeth, did you?
I'm sorry, I'm not well. So
No.
I'm sitting far away.
I thought you had your hand up. That's why.
I did. In terms of future trajectories, do you have a way, or if you thought about a way, that when people go through the oral histories, if you have scholars, for example, who are reading for different things, that they can then add their annotations or their.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I think we have to move in that direction for sure. I think there's space for that where you can add, where you can annotate it. You can make, you can comment. I'm sorry, you can comment the segments. But we're not there yet. But no, it's fascinating. Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I think future trajectories include what's, you know, on this screen right now. A possible community heritage documentation grant proposal that could embrace, you know, the African American Oral History Project that includes ours, hoping, you know, to continue farther along, thanks to the assistant planner Graham Petto continuing to work with the town of Montclair, very generous, you know, with his knowledge and expertise, as many people in this room actually, continuing to offer, you know, students new skills as we learn them ourselves, at least in my case, in the service of humanistic inquiry and engaging our communities to keep telling their stories. There are great implications really for our kind of work partnering with the Digital Humanities Center. And I just wanted to end with this because I started, you know, with the stories. Magic Circle by Maria Mazziotti Gillen. My mother drew her magic circle around us, led us inside where we were always safe. She told us stories, spinning the thread back between herself and her mother's mother, and connecting that thread to us, her daughters, and teaching us how to connect the same thread to our daughters and granddaughters. All those women baking bread and bearing children, teaching us to love ourselves, love them. The stories save our lives, passing the meaning on from one generation to the next, a silver thread that strengthens us. All those women caught in our hearts, teaching us how to laugh, how to make our arms into cradles, to hold each other and sing. if I can get to a point where I can map this thread, I think we've lived up to what the community expected of us. Thank you.